How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 2.
Hello, America. Welcome. It's Eric Erickson here across the nation. The phone number is 877-973-7425. If you want to be on the program, you can text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777, and you can get the show notes, the live stream, the podcast, all that stuff. Website back online. Going off on a wild tangent here for a moment, because I'm actually very fascinated by this, and I think you will be as well. You know what a prime number is? A prime number is a number that is only divisible by itself and 1. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. 2 divided by 1 is 2. 3 is another prime number. Then you get to 5, 7, and what's the next one? It's not 9, 10, 11, 13, and on up you go. Prime numbers. Then you get 17 is a prime number. Scientists believe it's not a coincidence that all the cicadas that Americans are dealing with right now, and now, by the way, I realize I've got a big national audience now. But if you are not familiar with the cicada, it's this very ugly bug that comes crawling out of the ground, climbs up into trees, comes out of a shell, and then it's got big wings and ugly red eyes, and it makes this just incredible sound. In fact, some friends were telling me the other day that they used a decibel meter, and it was 90 decibels in their backyard. It was so loud. And there are billions, if not trillions of them. If you follow me on Instagram, you've seen some of the pictures I've had. And it's something like right now, over between 1 and 10 million cicadas an acre in parts of the Southeast, including my backyard. It is incredibly loud in my backyard. And there are dead bugs everywhere. In any event, so there's a growing body of evidence that backs a scientific hypothesis. So these cicadas come out in prime numbered years. There's an 11-year batch, there's a 13-year batch, there's a 17-year batch. And that if you look at who the big predators are of cicadas, the different birds and snakes and others that love cicadas, the reproduction cycles of the predators do not align with prime numbers, which means that because cicadas come out in prime numbers, 11, 13, and 17 years, when they come out is typically when the population of their predators is actually not significant, so that this bug that takes forever to reproduce and then goes back in the ground, it can actually survive and perpetuate its species, propagate its species over time, because its predators have 2, 3, 4, and 6 year life cycles, and only every 83 to 87 years or so do the peak predator population align with the peak cicada population. So the cicadas have a fighting chance of survival. It's all about math and prime numbers. I'm fascinated by stuff like that. Very interesting, and there's a growing body of evidence that, in fact, there are a number of species that reproduce in this sort of rhythmic prime number cycle to avoid predators. It's just wild stuff. Now, you didn't come for that. You came for Nakba. Well, maybe you didn't even come for Nakba, but we need to talk about it. 2 days ago, Israel celebrated its Independence Day. In 1948, Israel was founded as a nation. You need to understand the history here, because Jews in this part, it was called the British Palestine, Palestine was never a nation. Palestine was when the Romans threw the Jews out in like 140 AD, they renamed the territory Syria-Palestine, and Palestine was somewhat derivative of Philistine. And so they changed the name to the Syria-Palestine territory or province. And then you fast forward, the Byzantines kept that. And then the Byzantines fell to the Ottomans, and the Ottomans kept that. And then with the fall of the Ottoman Empire after World War I, the British got a lot of this Middle Eastern territory, and it became the British Palestine territory, the British Palestine colony, essentially. What happened then in the 1900s is Jews began buying land in the Ottoman Empire. Now, they were treated as second or even third class citizens by the Ottomans, but they began to buy a lot of land there. During World War II, Arabs allied with the Nazis and began persecuting Jews in that area. Well, after World War II, more Jews, after what happened with the Nazis and the Holocaust, began moving into this territory. And it became very obvious, one, the Jews needed their own homeland. Two, there were enough Jewish property owners with contiguous properties now, they kind of filled out this area. And so three, the British, the United Nations, the French, the Americans, everybody decided, okay, let's give Israel their own nation based on the land they've already purchased, some historic boundaries, and they gave them on May 14th, 1948, the nation of Israel. Now, here's a problem. The Arabs who had allied with the Nazis did not want a Jewish nation. And Israeli Arabs really didn't want to be in Israel with Jews in charge. So the Arabs who lived in what was now the nation of Israel, the day after Israeli independence, May 15th, 1948, packed up and left because the surrounding Arab nations, Egypt and Jordan, Syria, they were going to invade and kill all the Jews. So the Arabs, they looked at this little fledgling nation of Israel without much of anything and decided, you know what, we're going to pack up, we're going to leave, and when we come home, all the Jews will be dead, and we can take back our houses and then take all the dead Jews' houses as well. Except it didn't turn out that way. The Jews kicked everybody's butt. Nakba, it means the catastrophe. They claim it was ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians in what they called mandatory Palestine. Half the Palestinians, predominantly Arab population, 750,000 people were expelled from their homes or made to flee. But that's not actually, that's the spin. And if you go to Wikipedia, it gives you the proper spin that they were forced to flee, 750,000 people forced to flee. That's not actually the truth at all. The truth is that they left because the Arab nations were going to invade and kill all the Jews. And they packed up and they left, many of them having plotted with the Arab nations to help them kill the Jews. But the Israeli Defense Force actually turned out to be extremely competent. And so the Israeli Defense Force pushed the Arab armies back, pushed out all of the Arabs who remained behind to help the Arab armies murder the Jews, and they won. In the 1980s, Yasser Arafat, the failed Palestinian leader and despot, decided that he would do some PR propaganda about Nakba and turn it into the catastrophe, this tragedy, the elimination, the genocidal ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. Except what he did is he took what happened, an ethnic cleansing of Jews, and turned it into an ethnic cleansing of Palestinians because the Palestinians and the Arab nations were not successful at killing all the Jews. You got to understand that history. When you see all these sob stories about these families with their family keys, and this is the thing, they hold on to the keys to their homes. Why did they have the keys to their homes still? Because one, they weren't ethnically cleansed. And two, because they thought they were coming back to their homes once all the Jews were dead. But it didn't happen that way. What's really remarkable is how a propaganda campaign has taken over. How a belief has been allowed to fester, and Palestinians now truly believe that they were part of some sort of ethnic cleansing by the Jews. Nothing of the sort. They not only forgot their history, they were lied to about the history, and so they truly believe that all these Palestinians were expelled. You know, there are lots of Israeli Arabs today. They live in Israel. They have rights. They serve in parliament. They have jobs. They're not treated as second-class citizens like the Jews were treated by the Arabs when the Arabs were in charge. They have far more rights than the Jews ever had under the Ottoman Empire. They're Israeli citizens. And those are the families that didn't pack up and leave, hoping that the Arabs would come in and kill the Jews. If you turn on TV today, or you get on the internet, there are a lot of news channels and news outlets talking about Nakba and what a tragedy it was the day after Israeli independence. And they're showing pictures of all these families with their keys. And it's become a thing. It's become a sign of tragedy. It's all these people having the keys to the homes they can never return home to because they were purged from the territory. And when you see the media giving you these sad sob stories, and you hear the sad sob stories of the Palestinians left homeless, you need to remind yourself, they made a choice to kill all the Jews, and they lost. And this is the consequence of that. You don't hear that from the newspapers. You don't hear that from social media. But you need to hear that. The Israelis were perfectly fine having Arabs live in their territory. The proof positive is the number of Israeli Arabs today, many of whom serve in the Israeli parliament. But the spin and the propaganda that the left has orchestrated over time has begun to dominate the media. It's begun to dominate these river to sea narratives of the left about Palestinian territory and we want to free Palestine from river to sea. And they say that's not a genocidal call. That's not a genocidal. Yes, actually it is. When you look at the map where the river is the Jordan, the sea is the Mediterranean. They want a Palestine from river to sea, which means they have to eliminate Israel to get it. Remember, these people come in this as a postmodern Marxism where words shape reality. And so they say when we chant river to sea, we're not calling for genocide, even though clearly on the map that's what has to happen. They just think the Jews are going to pack up and leave and go back to Europe, I guess, where they claim they're from. They're all Europeans, according to the left. It's all a series of lies designed to perpetuate a victimhood of Palestinians so that the Arab nations don't have to actually take account of the fact that they promised these Arabs who lived in Israel, you come into our territory, we're going to march in, kill all the Jews, and then you go back home. Well, not only did they never go back home because they didn't kill all the Jews fought back and won. The Arab nations then told all these Arabs who moved there, you know what, we're going to call you Palestinians, and we're not going to treat you as our citizens, and we're going to treat you as some third party and otherize you. That's the history of the Palestinian people. Palestinians weren't a thing. They were Arabs living in this British Palestine state who left and went into these Arab nations, waiting for the Arab nations to kill the Jews. And when the Arab nations failed, these Arabs who were not from these nations were then designated Palestinians and designated as refugees from their homeland. No, they weren't refugees from their homeland. They left so the Jews could be killed. And fortunately for humanity, they lost. That is Nakba. Don't believe the lies. Welcome back. It's Eric Erickson here. The phone number 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, Keith in Davenport, Florida. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Pretty good, Eric. How are you?
Great.
I wanted to say, first, before I start off, I'm so excited that your family is going to do the graduate or be able to do the graduation tonight. So many blessings.
Thank you so much.
My question is, or comment is, with the debates coming up, how can we trust CNN to not leak the questions to the Biden team? They kind of have a history of doing that before. So what kind of safeguards are there going to be?
Listen, Dana Bash and Jake Tapper are both friends of mine. I don't trust CNN as a network overall in really much of anything these days. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to these friends of mine who I think are great journalists, but the network itself, I think, is moving back to where it was under Jeff Zucker, where it's all about Trump all the time. Everything with Trump is the worst. I mean, literally the other morning, they did an entire segment on Donald Trump praising Hannibal Lecter, taking completely out of context what he did. I don't have faith in pretty much any network at this point to do fair. But here's the thing. I have great faith in Donald Trump to be able to actually give a great, witty, hilarious performance on stage that overcomes all the obstacles. I've said much about the man, but he's very funny on these debate stages and gets under Joe Biden. I mean, Biden clearly despises the man, and that actually gives Trump an advantage there because he gets under Biden's skin. I do love that they even agreed to the microphone cutoff. That's one of the things that Biden wants, is he wants microphones that automatically cut off when time expires. I just find it's going to be a spectacle. It's going to be grumpy old men. They should film it at a nursing home with all the other old people there to ask them questions about, I can barely get out of my wheelchair. How are your hips not hurt walking all day? I'm all in for this debate. I think it's going to be hilarious. I think the ratings are going to be off the charts for CNN on this as well. And it doesn't matter what sort of tricks are played. Donald Trump is a wily guy. I'm sure he'll find a way around them. Now, I got to tell you about the Prosperity is Possible tour. I want to spend a little more time on this sort of stuff later, but Prosperity is Possible is a tour by Americans for Prosperity around the country to remind you guys that we actually know how to fix the economy. We know the tried and true ideas that matter to improve the economy, to grow the economic success of Americans and get more people to the American dream. And if you go to prosperityispossible.com, you can find out where this bus tour is in your area. It's great speakers in your area educating you on the free market and educating you on how we can revive the American dream for the middle class. It's brought to you by Americans for Prosperity. Again, it is prosperityispossible.com. The folks at Americans for Prosperity, they're a do tank within the conservative movement. They do the business of the conservative movement. They don't just trade white papers in Washington, D.C., although they do that too. They want to get you involved as an activist, to be involved in the fight for free markets and free people. And they also want you to remember prosperity is possible. We already know how to do it. Go to prosperityispossible.com. Prosperityispossible.com. Find out where the bus tour is in your neighborhood. Hello, welcome. It's Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. If you would like to be on the program, I would be happy to have you on the program. Now, we got to move on to other things. The education, no. It was the Health and Human Services Secretary went before Congress and was asked questions about government funding and in particular about transgenderism. And I should pause here and back up. There's been a report in Great Britain. They had an outside specialist do a report on puberty blockers, medicines, and transgenderism. And the person who did the report did a remarkably compassionate job documenting that there are clearly people struggling. And we should not ignore their struggles, even as we're not sure of the best treatment for it, but that actually there is a lot of data now to suggest that we don't have enough knowledge to understand the long-term impact of giving puberty blockers to kids. And in fact, it does appear that we could be causing irreversible harm, that many preteens who have gender dysphoria or showing gender confusion, that they grow out of it. And by putting them on puberty blockers, even as they might grow out of it, we're causing irreversible harm to them. You will not be surprised to learn that the trans activists just unleashed hell over what is a very reasonable, level-headed report, because there can be no disagreement with the ideology. Well, the ideology is in full force in the Biden administration. This is the Health and Human Services Secretary, Secretary Becerra.
Congressman, recognize you're going somewhere completely different. First, you started talking about how a doctor should have the rights to not offer particular care. Then you stretch it out to provide for the system-wide services that
yes,
are
you've
very
put out
different.
this guidance.
Very different.
You've put out this guidance, and doctors do need to know.
Yes.
What are you going to do if they refuse to provide this care?
A doctor, if that doctor has religious objections, that doctor, under these rules, is not required to offer the
Okay, so
care.
you're committing here today that you will not withhold federal funding,
Doctors don't get federal funding, ma'am.
but the hospitals do.
So now talk to me about the
Are you saying that the...
Don't confuse the two.
Okay.
A doctor is not a hospital.
But the doctors are working in these hospitals. Are you going to say today, are you committing that you will not withhold federal funding from those healthcare facilities?
If a healthcare facility is violating the law and not providing the service they're required to,
we
they are
knew
not
that
entitled
you
to the
would
resources.
withdraw federal funding.
She's asking, that's Congresswoman Mary Miller, will the federal government withdraw federal funding from hospitals that refuse to perform sex change operations? And he is saying yes. He's trying to confuse the two between doctors who object and hospitals. The problem here is there's this thing in this country called Catholic hospitals and Catholic charities. Now, I'm not Catholic. I'm Presbyterian. Grew up Southern Baptist. You know, where I grew up, there are a lot of people who think Catholics aren't Christians. It's one of those weird things of Protestantism after the Reformation. Some of the strongest prayer warriors in my life and great, strong Christians I know happen to be Catholic. But we're in the South, where I am at least, and I know how this thing goes. But many people have benefited because of the role of the Catholic Church in the United States, in hospitals, in orphanages, in education, in helping the homeless. Catholic charities and hospitals play major roles in this country. And what the Biden administration, and remember, Joe Biden says he's Catholic. Harrison Butker pointed that out in his speech. What the Biden administration has decided to do is a Catholic hospital was going to have its funding cut if they decline to perform a sex change operation for someone suffering transgenderism. That's what the Secretary of Health and Human Services is saying there, that healthcare facilities that don't follow the law, and according to him, the law is you got to provide these sex change operations, well, then they're going to lose their funding. Now, here's the problem. Whether you or I believe it or not, I happen to be on the side that does, but you may not. But the Catholic Church, like the Baptist Church, like the Orthodox Church, like the PCA, Presbyterian Church, actually takes Genesis 1 very seriously. Genesis 1 is the creation account that Orthodox Christians believe. And again, doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. Orthodox Christianity believes that God made the heavens and the earth. And in Genesis 1, there is a word used, bara, and bara is a very specific word that is only attributed to God's ability to create things that people can't create. Bara, that's in Genesis 1. God bara'd us. He made us. And when it says God bara, made mankind and bara, made them male and female. What that's signaling in Genesis 1 for Orthodox Christianity, and again, and not Orthodox capital O like Greek Orthodox, but Orthodox traditional understandings of Christianity, the Catholics believe, is that God made mankind male and female, and therefore we are not capable of making mankind male and female. Only God can do that. So for Catholics, it's anathema to their faith to think that you can convert someone that God made male into a female or convert someone God made female into a male. It's part of their religious faith. And again, you can disagree with that. However, the First Amendment of the United States of America says that Catholics have the freedom to practice their religion. They have the freedom to live out their religion in the public square. The Supreme Court has said the same thing, that people of faith have the right not just to go worship on a Sunday. That's what Barack Obama argued in the mid-2000s when Barack Obama was president. Barack Obama's Solicitor General went to the United States Supreme Court and argued that the freedom to exercise your religion clause in the First Amendment only means a freedom to worship. That was literally what Barack Obama argued. People have glossed this over, their hostility to religion, but Barack Obama's Solicitor General argued in the United States Supreme Court that the free exercise clause of the First Amendment only means your ability to go to church on Sunday. That's it. The United States Supreme Court unanimously, in a court that included Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan at the time, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, unanimously rebuked the Obama administration and said, actually, the free exercise clause means that a person of faith, of any faith, has the total ability to exercise their religion in all aspects of their life. So that includes, for example, Catholics living in the public square. Now, let's back up to last week. Last week, I mentioned it on the program. It did get a lot of headlines. But there was a case in the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. It went before a 3-judge panel on appeal. It was an Obama appointee, a Biden appointee, and a George H.W. Bush appointee. And the case involved a Catholic school that fired one of their employees because the employee, who is a man, is gay, decided to marry his partner, his gay partner, same-sex marriage. And the Catholic Church believes, based on Genesis 1, marriage is between a male and a female. So they fired the guy, said he's not living up to their standards. Now, you can disagree with that. But to the Catholic Church, this is part of their faith. So a 3-judge panel, a Bush appointee, a Biden appointee, and an Obama appointee, unanimously, 3-0, concluded the Catholic Church has the right to do that because the Catholic Church, by faith, believes marriage is between a man and a woman, and because this school operates as part of the Catholic Church, they have great latitude to operate the school according to their faith. A year ago, the city of Philadelphia told Catholic charities in Philadelphia, you are no longer allowed to participate in adopting of children because you won't adopt to same-sex couples because your faith teaches the marriages between a man and a woman and a child should only be raised in a 2-parent household. You don't adopt, you don't allow single people to adopt in your charity, and you don't allow same-sex couples to adopt, so we're shutting you down. The Catholic charities sued. It went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, I think it was a 7-2 decision, said actually the Catholic Church is allowed to run its adoption agency the way it sees fit according to its faith. So here now comes the next push. The Catholic president, remember, they always want you to know he's a Catholic president. His Secretary of Health and Human Services, who also says he's Catholic, is testifying before Congress that we're not going to allow a Catholic hospital to receive federal money to help with the poor unless that Catholic hospital also performs sex change operations for people struggling with gender dysphoria, which the Catholic Church is not going to do. Every time these cases go to court, the religious community wins. But because of politics and their deeply held religious beliefs on the left, they continue to go after the charitable organizations of these religious institutions. Can you imagine if the religious hospitals of America closed up overnight? Can you imagine? Do you know how many of the hospitals in this country are run by religious institutions, particularly of the Catholic Church? Remember, after Katrina, the public school system in New Orleans got wiped out, and the Catholic Church allowed the local community to send their kids to the Catholic schools, and grades went up. But the church-state activists who believe in the separation of church and state strictly, they filed lawsuits and fought the Catholics giving free education to all the kids in New Orleans, and they wound up reopening the public schools and handing control back over, and test scores and everything else began to decline again. There is as much a religious dogma against people of faith as people of faith have religious dogma. What's notable is you rarely hear it come out in congressional hearings. But here you have it, the Secretary of Health and Human Services saying they will punish Catholic hospitals in America if Catholic hospitals do not bend towards the transgender agenda. The doctors themselves have a religious exception, but the hospital, despite being run by the Catholic Church, does not. They're going to lose in the Supreme Court on this proposition, but they're going to fight it because it's their religious dogma. You know, this is a great example, for example, of Old Glory Bank and why it exists by conservatives for conservatives, a bank that was founded to ensure conservatives wouldn't get canceled or punished by a banking institution. There have been a series of stories over the last several months about banks canceling the accounts of conservatives, of people who work for Donald Trump and others. You'll never have that happen with Old Glory Bank. Bank run by conservatives for conservatives. It's a highly innovative bank as well. Their online app, or their app on my phone, is fantastic. I've mentioned this before, but it's a true thing. I had a pile of cash and I wanted to deposit it in the bank. I got an Old Glory Bank account, and I used to have an online bank, and there was absolutely no way that you could deposit cash. It simply was not possible to deposit cash. And with Old Glory Bank, I can generate a QR code. There's a CVS by my house that participates. There are 88,000 retail locations around the country. Go to the CVS, they scan the QR code, they take the cash. It gets deposited seamlessly in my account. It's like magic, and it's from the thoughtful innovation of Old Glory Bank. You can get a bank account with them, oldglorybank.com. I have a no-fee checking account, no-fee savings account with them, good interest rates. You can do mortgages, everything else with them. They are a real bank. They want to be your bank. Run by conservatives for conservatives, oldglorybank.com. In 8 minutes or less, you get an account. Oldglorybank.com is the website, oldglorybank.com. Member FDIC, equal housing lender, terms and conditions apply. Hello and welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. There is some news that you need to know about. Paul Kessler died on November 5th, 2023. Paul Kessler is a Jewish man who was involved in a counter-protest against Palestinian protesters. And a professor of Moore Park College named Louay Al-Naji got into a confrontation with Kessler. And Kessler died after the altercation. At the time of the death, Al-Naji and Palestinian protesters claimed that Kessler was the aggressor and slipped. But video showed that the professor, Louay Al-Naji, hit Kessler in the face with a bullhorn at significant impact. There has been, much like the Palestinian protesters have denied the babies being thrown in ovens in Israel and the beheaded babies, they denied that this Paul Kessler man was murdered or beaten and that caused his death. They just don't want you to acknowledge the truth. They don't have the truth. They're not willing to engage in the truth. Well, a California Superior Court judge has ruled that there's enough evidence to charge Louay Al-Naji with manslaughter in the death of Paul Kessler. The medical examiner determined that Paul Kessler died due to a blow to the head consistent with being hit by that bullhorn. which was caught on tape. That's good. It's a tragedy what happened. Deputy Sheriff Brianna Vasquez testified she responded to the scene while Kessler was lying on the concrete. She interviewed Al-Najee. He told her Kessler approached him on the street corner, that the two inched closer as they argued until they stood at about 18 inches apart. Kessler thrust his phone into Al-Najee's face. Al-Najee told the sheriff's deputy, prompting Al-Najee to swing his megaphone from his hip in an attempt to knock the phone away. He made contact with the phone, sending it flying. Al-Najee told Vasquez that possibly it hit Kessler's hand. Other officers described their interviews with two witnesses who said they saw Al-Najee swing the bullhorn and it caused Kessler to fall. The medical examiner for Ventura County concluded Kessler's autopsy and testified as to his findings. He found 4 exterior injuries to the left side of Kessler's face, along with a tear inside Kessler's mouth and damage to his tongue where he'd clenched his teeth after being hit with the bullhorn. After examining the bullhorn and the groove pattern of the rubber on the bottom of it, Mina, the medical examiner, concluded the scrapes and lacerations to the left chin, left upper lip, and outer corner of his left eye were caused by the bullhorn striking Kessler, and that the black eye noticeable on autopsy was either caused by the bullhorn or the fall. Justice may be done here. Good, but notice the spin and the denial. It's just a recurring pattern.